Hey, everybody. Welcome to I Don't Like Murder. I'm Rita, and this is my co-host, Jenny. Hey, Jenny.
Hi, Rita.
Hey, so we've got a great case to talk to you about today. But first, I want to talk to you about something that's exciting for the I Don't Like Murder channel. Now, Jenny and I have a company together that we have a channel and that we were going to post all the different shows that we're creating under it, but then we also thought each show should have its own channel. So a couple of weeks ago, we opened the I Don't Like Murder channel, and this past week, we have our first subscriber. Now, it may seem small to you because people have millions of subscribers, but we are just at the beginning of this journey, and Jenny and I are doing it all ourselves. I'm editing, Jenny's doing the website and the social media promotion. I'm trying to figure out the thumbnails and work behind the scenes, and then at the same time bring you these cases that we enjoy looking at beyond just what we see in the media or on Dateline. So I just ask some questions about crime. So for that one subscriber who we don't know who you are, thank you for watching. Thank you for everyone who's watching. We're getting lots and lots of views with very little, if no, promotion, and that's slowly going to be changing. We'll be we've got a lot of social media that we haven't opened up yet, but we're super excited, right, Jenny?
Yes, thank you. Welcome to our channel.
Yay! Welcome, 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 and please comment, subscribe, like all the YouTube stuff that helps to build the channel. And again, we're at the very beginning of our journey. We're learning lots. We thought, well, maybe our family and friends will see it, but we're seeing lots and lots of people are seeing it just because through the rotation of YouTube. So we're super excited. So again, to our very first subscriber, yay. This is, I think, our 6th or 7th video that we've done. So we're super excited and to have you along the journey. Tell your friends and family, subscribe, have fun, have more people watch us. So awesome, super excited. So today's case is about the very famous Scott Peterson. Now, Scott Peterson was convicted of the murder of his wife, Laci Peterson. And so there are copious amounts of videos and articles and books all about this murder and all the details of the murder. What I thought would be interesting today is for Jenny and I to talk about some key points. And it has a lot to do with what happens when a local news story becomes a national media story, from kind of the beginning to the end of when a cable news station and a court TV station and a small town in Northern California is inundated with press and then the celebrity of the crime. So one interesting thing about this case is the town is about 35 miles away from me. And so I was able to experience the local part of it from the beginning of when Laci Peterson disappeared to when it became this media frenzy circus. And so I'd like to talk under the kind of the point of the monetization of crime or murder. Monetization of murder or crime. So, and pretty much that's what really a lot of our talks are about, is kind of the celebrity, what brings it to our attention, why some cases and other cases. So I just wanted to go and just ask those questions and talk to Jenny about it because I think it's really interesting. So ready to go? Ready to go, Jenny? Here we go.
Excited.
So the case is really about the disappearance of Laci Peterson. And there's so much information with this, and we're not going to go through all the details because a lot of articles I've been reading up about all these different angles to the articles to the case, but it's really focused on the media and the money making potential of a crime and who gets picked and why. And so talk to you a little bit about the town, how small it is compared to the Bay Area. Well, it's in the Bay Area in the Central Valley, but I had to take some key notes because there's so much information. So if I turn my head away, it's because I don't have a teleprompter, because I'm not fancy, because we're not fancy, right, Jenny?
We're not fancy.
We're not fancy. So, and here's the amazing thing too, for all you youngsters out there. Laci disappeared, her disappearance was reported on 12/24/02, almost 20 years ago,
Wow.
or a little under 19. 20 years is a long time, and it's such a big case. It seems like it's right. You know, you say Scott Peterson, people's like, we know who he is.
Yeah.
And newsflash, so I live in the Bay Area in a small little agriculture town. Scott Peterson now lives in San Quentin, which is about 50 miles from me. And then the interesting part of seeing it locally and then watching the investigation unfold, he came through my town. It was all over the news, and then so it's wild when you know. It's just like, so Jenny, I'm not from your state. I'm only familiar with some key towns, but if someone said, oh, the next town over, you'd know exactly where that's at, where a lot of people wouldn't. So it's really wild to go, oh, he rented a car in my town. How interesting is that? Then every newspaper and media known to man, you know, this little standalone little rental car company, there's people taking pictures, watching people go in and out. It was amazing. But getting back to the story, so it was Scott, the last time that Laci was seen was on the 23rd of December. She was with her mom. And then Scott reported the last time he saw her was the morning of Christmas Eve, 2002. Who ends up calling the police to report a disturbance was later in the afternoon. People said Scott said he saw her that morning. Later in the afternoon, it was her stepfather who called into the police. And that's what started, of course, the disappearance investigation. So at the time, Laci was only 27 years old. She was 8 months pregnant, and she was the wife of Scott Peterson. That's really all we knew. She just disappeared. She's young, pretty, and pregnant with the first child. So they had been married for 5 years. The first child's on the way. They lived in the small little agriculture town of Modesto. So Modesto is, well, it's twice the size of my small little town, but it's in Central Valley. It's about 95 miles east of San Francisco. I live about 60 miles east of San Francisco. But again, most of California is agriculture that people don't realize, but they are, Modesto is right in the center of a huge amount of farm-rich land. So when you think Central Valley here, you think grow, dirt, and lots of commerce it's just a really agricultural rich place. So, and it has a lot of similarities to my town, except it's twice the size and twice the amount of people. But it's a very large inhabited city for a little bit over 200,000 people. And it's one of the, I think, 17th on the list of cities, because there's a lot of small towns in California. But the big thing is, it's just a big agricultural town. And then the other thing, like I said, is I live close to it. And so I was able to kind of see and experience so think of your local news. That's what mainly people watch. They don't watch cable news, but your local news, you get the word of a disappearance. You see pictures of 4 or 5 people, more family members gathering as time goes on. And then within 2 days, it's all over local news. And then once cable started to pick it up, then there was thousands of people out. Key points to this whole thing when the media comes to a small little town, and that's why I wanted to talk about the differences of it's not New York City, it's not San Francisco, it's not Los Angeles. When a tiny little town, it's not used to that kind of attention, then I have questions in terms of the overall pictures of the judicial system, in terms of not necessarily what the crime is, because like I said, you can go through and all these reasons why he looks guilty circumstantially, but the big thing is, what about this case that made whoever communicated this up. So we've got local media, we've got comms directors in the police department. But the thing that is always in the back of my mind is, if you look about missing person cases, there's about 200,000 a year. So someone gets called in, but someone's missing. We usually hear that someone is reported missing after the crime. When we watch a show about the parents, called the teenager in missing, they were trying to determine if it was a runaway versus this. Yeah. But if you look at it from the point of view of 200,000, what about this case created the media circus that it did?
Yeah.
Lots and lots of analysts say it, and there was a really great article years ago in Vanity Fair that said it was the perfect Hollywood story, tabloid story. Young, beautiful wife, pregnant with the first child. And, everyone was just horrified because of that connection. Young mother, gone, disappeared. And then, of course, as it started to unfold with the affair, the girlfriend nobody knew about, blah, blah, blah. Then it becomes, that's it. It writes the book. But yeah, so the thing is that you look at, why would cable news, HLN was kind of being created, part of it, but part of the cable news network, instead of Court TV, a whole new channel went into place. And then that went right to the Jodi Arias case, all these big high profile things. And most people, I'm sure, know that content on TV, YouTube, anything, it's really meant to advertise on. So right, so the need for a story to bring in as many eyes as possible is great. But then you tie it into, here's a case that's really, really, truly being investigated in real time. And now the media is converging on this small little country town. And they're now kind of integrated into the investigation. Not, I'm sure the police don't want them there 24/7, but all of a sudden someone will say, I saw him, I think a car, instead of calling the police with the tips. The media is going through the garbages and, who knows what. And there's all of these cases of, all the things that look suspect. He sold the car, within a week, before they knew she was, that she'd shown up in the ocean, right, on the side of the water. Well, then they go to the guy who buys the car, and a media organization tries to offer him money to take pictures of inside the car, or to buy the car from him, or the guy who bought the house after everything was said and done. There's still so much to be, because you can't just walk in somebody's house and take pictures. But then the person, I guess you could, if someone knocked on the door to say, can I take pictures? But the person who bought the house is like, you're not getting it for free. So it's all this from this incredible, terrible tragedy. That's what I mean about the monetization, is that, is it, okay, so that's that part, is that, so when a huge national media presence gets in on the investigation, what does that mean for the actual fairness of the investigation, or what they bring up to trial?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm sure it creates a huge struggle for law enforcement to try to do their job.
Right.
And for the reasons you said, because the media is beating them to these people.
So if we think about a lot of the reason, my opinion only, why YouTube podcasts, alternate from TV, as we know, as standard or legacy media, as they call it, why it's so popular is because pretty much you can't be sure of it, because it's like, sometimes life is boring. It's like, there was a fire at the wherever Elks Club. And then, well, we got that's it. There was a fire, the police came, the firemen came and burned it down. But that doesn't fill up a lot of time. So now we have to have expert in Elks Club fires, and then somebody who, was an ex fireman who knows exactly who could have said it, versus then we have a fire specialist, and then we have all you have to do is say fire and Elks, and you've just, packed in an hour. So that's what was happening with the Scott Peterson, Laci Peterson case, is that, so there's stories of, for real, it's like they were the journalists, media, producers, so desperate for info, they'd have a source in the police department, they'd have a source at the court. They were able to unseal documents. And then there's this one story about how they unsealed the documents because, of course, Laci's remains washed up on the shore in the Berkeley Marina. And then a little bit later, the baby did.
Yeah.
And so there was some, and the judge said, because this case is out of control, everything that comes in just gets sealed. Well, somebody in the court, leaked it to a pretty prominent legal media person, and they spent days and days and days talking about how they noted something in the autopsy of the baby that could have been, because they thought the baby just was released based on being in the water for so long from the mother. And now they're thinking maybe the baby was taken out and murdered before this whole thing. Had no basis in anything other than day after day after day of all of these analysts and pundits reviewing like this one picture, because the case is a lot of different, things.
Yeah.
But and just when we look at the fairness, we talk about juries and what they get and what they don't get. When a case gets this big and little bits and pieces just get so inflamed, and again, like I gave the example of the fire in the Elks Club, is that someone says an autopsy. Okay, well, let's have, a forensic specialist on who's going to talk about in their opinion, because everything's their opinion, because they're not in the investigation. But then what was interesting about this case, there's 3 different law enforcement comms departments that are, that the media is making their wheels and deals with. Somebody's a source. So then you think, was part of the media's job to get out certain information to steer the case in terms of the guilt of the husband towards it? Now, there was a lot of stuff, but the fact that in the end, the lead detective on it wrote a book that says, I knew with the first 33 questions that he was guilty. Okay, well, so that's like, that's sensational. Everybody agrees with it. There's enough, whatever it is, to convict. But then, go ahead.
Oh, that also, to me, him saying that, it also leads to the question of, was there confirmation bias in your investigation? Which in this case, I'm certain that he was correct, but that's not every case. I think that my opinion, but I think that most investigators would have their idea of who did it, what happened, or whatever very quickly. I know I would.
Right.
But then that leads to confirmation bias. So
then just because, like we've said before, we're connoisseurs of the crime, it's like, okay, the husband did it. Okay, the wife did it. It's always the husband. Or then you learn things like, okay, you know what, the biggest risk to pregnant women at the end of the pregnancy is the husband. Because that's the only way he can solve it, right? So you start to tie in kind of your experience and your crime show thing. But so it's such it takes it to the level of surreal though when it becomes like a circus. Because there's so many clips of people, and I think it also has to do with my bias towards the media as well, is that I don't even, everybody says that maybe, that could have, it's possible if, which is not any information, it's just your opinion, right? So, and yet, and so, but probably 20 years ago when this whole thing went down, I was riveted to the case too. Because the little detective in my brain was saying, well, that looks weird. Now, why would
Yeah.
he do that? Why would he drive from his town to my town to rent a car? Because he didn't realize they put a GPS on him and they were following him. And so then it was, but the tie-in for me, and which I'll never know for sure, just I can only ask questions, is the police or the investigative team and the media, they do go hand in hand because they need each other. They need, to say, help me find somebody. And yet, so they've got to do this whole give and take. And so the police is saying, I'm going to, I'll trade with you this information, keep this quiet and do this. But then if the police are working with the prosecutor, how fair is it to be on this level? Because to say, can you get a jury that's not tainted? Well, in this case, the judge said in Modesto, you can't. They moved it to the Bay Area. I mean, to the city, because the judge said it's too tainted, because it wasn't just the news coverage, it was the entire town was inhabited. And then everybody was making money. Everybody, the friend, third over, cousin, brothers, ex-girlfriend from 10 years ago, anyone who could be connected, that the media was just rabid to talk to.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. And so just pulling apart the case, keep going, okay, was anybody, because I don't know if you get to a point where it's just so overwhelming. It's like, well, everyone else is making money. I may as well make money because he texted me a month ago, so I can sell this text to somebody.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Right. So that's where it goes back to the monetization. And then someone gets an agent and a media tour based on a text they receive a month before any of this happened. But because the connection of, or the friend that knew somebody who was at a party with the, the person he was having the affair with. And so that's the whole thing of going, which you and I talk about a lot, is once the smoke is cleared, there's a devastated family. There's a woman who's gone, and a family who would be prepared to have 50 people standing in your front yard with cameras every single day to watch you go to the grocery store, because that's what it's like.
Yeah.
That's crazy, right? It's like
right after you go through the worst thing in your life.
Right. Say, are they going to say anything? The way they got into the car. I mean, that's because that being into that, under that microscope of, she doesn't look happy today, she must have gotten bad news. And news break, news flash. We watched the mother walk from the front door to the car.
Yeah. Oh my god.
We think she was on the way to the grocery store. She doesn't look happy. There must have been bad news. Can we please have an expert on somebody who looks like they got bad news? And it sounds ridiculous, but that's some of the stuff that was like that. Or you see them being chased in a parking lot.
Yeah.
So, right? Is that, but then has to be an insatiable appetite as a public, because you can't keep doing something no one watches.
Right.
And then it has to get bigger and bigger. Plus, I learned this other thing, when we see these breaking news or news flash, advertisers pay more for those.
I believe it.
Yeah. So then they'll say, well, if you want to be during this segment of the show, at the 45 minutes after the hour part, we're going to do a breaking news. That's why every time I see news and I go, breaking news, it's like, oh, the advertisers in between, I look at the commercials going, well, they paid more for that. Just interesting. But going back to all of what we see and we watch is content for advertisers to try to group together.
So I have a question, which you might not know, but given that, since the majority of people now have moved online to get their news, so like on Twitter, do the advertisers on Twitter do they have to pay more for space next to one of those stories?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I thought I'm just based on my own timeline, because I'm so infrequent, but when I do, or like I tell you when I'm paranoid, say, Jenny, we talk about Oreos, and the next day I get Oreo Twitter, ads.
Yeah.
But a lot of the ads I think are tied to who you follow.
I think so.
Right. But then again, sometimes I get some weird ones that I.
Yeah, but even at that, I don't know. I don't think there would really be a way to do that, because I do think that the ads, I have never ran Twitter ads, but I ran Facebook ads years and years ago. And it was targeted to, like, you pick your demographic,
Right.
and it's targeted to that. And I know that now, like, they have special things you can put on your website and collect their information, and then you can target ads to people who have visited your website,
Mhm.
things like that. But I don't think that, and I don't know, they could very well do it, but I don't think that they can target the ad to breaking news or something, but they may be able to. I don't know.
And I'm sure their computers are constantly, because they're just tracking that information,
Yeah.
you know, how active, if we can pull on our account, how many people for how many minutes watched a video,
Mhm.
they can track, you know,
Oh,
our movements.
anything.
Right.
Yes.
Or this is what happens, like when I go and visit my dad in Nevada, all of a sudden I'll get Nevada ads.
Yeah.
If my location, because my location's on in my maps. And
Mhm.
then I get very paranoid and I realize, oh, it's my phone.
Yeah.
but right, so yeah, so I think we're always being followed. Thanks for reminding me of that.
You're welcome.
That's why I'm thinking,
I'm here for the conspiracies.
That's right. How can there be unsolved, crimes? Because it's like, if you have a phone, and almost everybody does, how can you get off the grid, right? But what was really interesting in studying the case and studying the media behind it, there were new protocols put in for journalists and for courtrooms and for law enforcement officers for just this thing. When a story goes national, what do you do? And it was about, how the judicial system handles it, because they were really trying to not control the type of information, but how frenzied it got.
Yeah.
Where it had to be, courtrooms, because it really is a competitive world. Of course, the media is, they want to get that story first, and and so at some point there's only courthouses so big that you can't cash in every favor. Every news organization is going to have somebody. But it's frightening too, that you come to find out after the fact that certain things get leaked. And why would, in an investigation, certain things get leaked unless the prosecution wants to bias the jury?
Yeah.
Because it's those weird things that we talk about with cases. We'll post, it's going to post next week, a story about someone who's exonerated, but it's about sitting there talking about juries and what they come in with, and what the voir dire is supposed to say. Can you still be impartial to this case, and follow the law as it's written? But we talked about one case where the person does interviews afterwards and says, I just, I made a point to do it because of my experience, which you're not supposed to do. And then, but how do you walk into something that's on the TV constantly, like the Scott Peterson case, and go, how can I say that I don't know anything about it?
Right.
I don't care if you're in the town of Modesto or if you're in San Francisco. How can you not be aware of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Indiana, and I can tell you, I was in my early 20s, and I knew about it, but I wasn't watching the news on a regular basis.
Right.
So, I mean, it was all over.
Right.
And
so in your periphery, you knew that case existed.
Yeah.
And right. And then, and all of the big climactic things of the girlfriend nobody knew about, the voicemails, or the pretending, he's at her vigil, the missing wife's vigil, pretending he's in France because he's living this double life.
Yeah.
It is a Hollywood story with very tragic, but really tragic, because for whatever reason, because he, to this day, he says he didn't do it. His appeals have been going and going and going and going. He had the right. He did it first was adjudicated with the guilty, and then with the death penalty. Then that was overturned, And now he's trying to get a new trial because of that being overturned. And so I think as early as 2020, the judge said, yeah, we don't need to do this again. The conviction stays, but you don't, you'll just stay, instead of death row, you'll just be in jail forever. But there's still people actively trying to show that it wasn't him.
Yeah.
And which is their prerogative. But the amount of, even as late as or early as, or the last time about March of 2020, the stories about the appeal, and then more stories, big, longer stories about the whole aftermath of it all. They're still, so almost 20 years later, they're still creating content about it. And again, I go back to, I was one person out of 200,000. And like another big thing was the city of Modesto. It cost almost $3 million to prosecute it, which is a lot of money, for one case. And then I just think of all of that media attention, all of those millions and millions of dollars in media attention. And I think about the 199,000 people who it's not brought to their attention. Just, it's just interesting, just very interesting. And does it catch our interest? Because how do you gauge it? So somebody is saying this is a case that needs to go national.
I outside looking in, I think it's a pregnant woman goes missing on Christmas.
Right. That's the story.
I mean, it's
right. And
like,
then
you would be almost mad if you didn't hear about that.
Right. And then it gets juicier and juicier. Right. Because now, and then because there's so much to the case of him doing the interviews, and then him thinking he was pretty savvy. Right. So because the story and that's the other part of when the media looks like they're working alongside, because they're digging through the people's past and looking at their social media and trying to interview everybody and their brother that knew them, right alongside the police, even though they're not working with the police, they're just doing it for the content.
And back then there wasn't social media like it is today. There wasn't texting like it was today. Like that was things that I don't even think I was texting in 2002. I maybe not. I don't know.
Flip phone. Was that a flip phone time?
Yeah.
Right. And the thing I remember, the big thing when texting came out, people were like, "Oh, that's a young person's thing." Number one, and then everybody just either misspelled things or typed in acronyms. It was like, how long is that going to stay? Right. Of course.
Forever.
And I always think it's a sign of somebody's age who, like someone like me, that spells out the entire word. Like, I was like, people go, you could just do IDK for I don't know, Rita. I'm like, what am I, 20?
Yeah. What I don't like is when people say out loud the acronyms. Like IDK. No, say the words. You're not typing. You're not trying to do, because and I know, like, when it first started, you had I think it was like 160 characters, so you had to get everything in that little bit, where now you can type a whole book to someone. So
that's right. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is going to kind of veer off track just slightly, but this reminds me a lot of the oh my gosh, I can't remember the guy's name now, in Colorado that killed his whole family, but it was more recent. Chris.
Oh, you mean the wife and the two little girls?
Yeah.
Yes. What? Chris Watts.
Yeah. No, because her social media and her texting was a huge thing that made her friends know that something wasn't right. Whereas in 2002, Laci wouldn't have, she wouldn't have been that involved in it to where it would have automatically sent somebody.
No, because just like anybody, right? If people are expecting you and because the the family was really close. She was really close with her mom and her, extended family. And she was the one that everybody came to the house because she loved to cook. And so she was spending the 23rd, and they had her on video cooking and getting stuff prepared for Christmas dinner. So we go, oh, I talked to her on the night of the 23rd. We were talking about, this is the mom, talking about this and this. So when there was silence throughout the Christmas morning or Christmas Eve morning, and then the big thing that he told everybody he was going golfing, and then, but he told the police he went fishing when this whole thing went down. And then the stepfather said, wait, I thought you said you were golfing, because that's weird.
Yeah.
Because even though the Berkeley Marina, right next to San Francisco, that ocean is pretty rough. So in the winter time, I just laugh because people think California, yeah, how rough it could be. It's rough, it's cold, and it's just an odd thing to go, I went fishing on Christmas Eve in rough waters. But okay, I'm sure some people do. But so that was like the beginning of, you either golfed or you fished. Those are, you're right. So, and the big unusual thing, I mean, he was a huge golfer. That little tidbit we found out, I think Phil Mickelson, the famous professional golfer, they either were in school together or I'm not sure. But so everybody it's like, so you knew the guy was a golfer. He wasn't known to be a fisherman. So it's just like those
all
weird,
kinds of red flags,
right? There. But because anyone would go, oh, that's Christmas Eve, why would you go fishing? But it's not our thing unless it was a fishing family. So it's all these little things that you can in the end go, dude, you were really trying to distract people from what was going on, and then you just came off like weird. And
I think that just goes to show that know your people. So when they're acting weird, when something is off.
Yeah, and yet, because of course they were married for 5 years, and her family stood behind him for a long time in the beginning.
Yeah, they did.
And then something, and I don't have it all memorized, but I remember the press conference where the family came out and said, tell us where she is. Because something, maybe it was the affair, when the ex-girlfriend or I just feel bad for everybody because we, to say their roles, but she didn't know that the guy was married. She didn't know until somebody said, hey, did you hear about the guy that came to the Christmas party with you? And then she turned the news on. Went, oh my goodness.
Yeah, how freaked out would you be then?
Say, that's a big thing to leave out, besides you said you weren't married, but now your wife's missing. Big thing to leave out. And then, putting it all together. But then she's thrust into the limelight. So of course she goes to the police, tells her story, and then she's doing a news conference. And then the whole thing just keeps growing from there. Just so is that, what do you do when, you're definitely a party to it, but then her family members and her, it just follows her. And then she's got a kid to protect, and she's a single mom, and it's like, you want to say, oh my goodness, she came out and did the right thing by saying, here's my story. But then, it's just like regular person USA all of a sudden being thrust in that. And then all the criticism she took, because that's the other part, just like putting yourself out there on social media. People are not always kind, they're not always kind to say, you shouldn't have, or, there's a lot of goofy people out there. But going back to my analogy about the analysts and the Elks Club and the fire, is that when you've got, because the media has an arc of a story, because they want to keep you coming back, right? It's got to be sensational. It's got to be breaking news, newsflash.
Yeah.
So when they're working alongside the investigation and they're saying, we can't hold this, we're going to tell the public because we need a newsflash or a breaking news, is that when the smoke clears, of course, and then we hear pundit upon pundit, people who are supposed to be experts. And this is just my theory, is that this starts to kind of denigrate expertise. to a degree.
Yeah. I
Right? Because
agree
it's
with
like you
that.
see these, you know, we have no idea who these people are, but they've been expert in something because they taught at a university or they taught, you know, they're a specialist, and there's a million different specialists. But then they come on and say, based on something I'm looking at in real time with you, or information we're not supposed to have, but because it's media, somebody leaked it.
Mhm.
And based on all this very limited information, let me tell you what I think.
Yeah.
So then you go, oh, okay. And it's kind of that I think that's where I read an article the other day about the public's trust in media is at an all-time low, like really low.
Yeah.
Like that, like it's really unfortunate. For me, I'll do this, read it, go, oh, that's really awful. Do you think it's happened? I'm not sure it happened. And it's sad. It used to be you could go to one source and go, okay, that person has confirmed it, but it's
Mhm.
sources say, people who are, you know, familiar with their thinking, nobody's on record anymore. So I'm like,
Yeah.
well, if someone can't just come out and say, I said it, or this really happened, or show me a picture,
Yeah.
then it's, yeah. So that's, I just wonder when I'm looking through it to say, is this part of the expertise? Because it does seem like a lot of news, cable news, any news,
Mhm.
is a lot of people just pontificating about what they think about something they're not really involved in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? It's like to be an analyst or a pundit or what they call it. So when you're looking going, well, in my day, and all these retired police officers and detectives, and that's their new job. They're a media person. They
Yeah.
have an agent. They have, you know, a booker, they have staff. It's not just like they, you know, got in front of Zoom and said, let me answer these questions. They are paid to create content, because why would they come and give their opinion without being paid? Because of their expertise. So it's just really interesting to look at, to go, we want a sensational story, but the story has to fit. So do they not show us stuff that doesn't fit the story arc?
Yes, I'm sure.
Right. And if we don't show it, so when you work hand in hand with me, not on, you know, it's just happenstance that the police need the media to help inform the public of what they want us to be informed of.
Yeah.
But when it becomes a frenzy and the media now says, we're going to do what we want, and we'll burn every bridge that we have and every source, because there'll be a whole new group of people you can build sources with, you know, relationships with. That's kind of, you know, that's just one thought I wonder if going again, it has the Hollywood making story, but in terms of justice, is it really served? And does it create this thing of every single time we see this type of situation, is the husband always at fault? Probably, right? I don't know.
Probably most of the time.
Right. Or is it reverse? Are we going to have to see the girlfriend? Are we going to have to listen to the tapes? You know, what if those don't exist?
Right.
What if it's just the wife who disappears? Still the husband. I mean, statistically, it's usually the person who knows you.
Statistically, it's the husband, but
it's like, no matter what. But and if it's the wife, it's antifreeze. That's all. That's how it goes, right? So the question is, are these types of crimes, you know, beneficial to adjudicating the crime? And don't know. Those are just things I think about, to go, does it make a difference if we don't know? Does a case make a difference in the public sphere of, you know, of if it's a quiet case? Or because I keep going back to the last case you talked about, that nobody knows about Ronnie Long until he spends 44 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. And it's just a little blip, because I even had to, you know, research to do kind of the stuff for the video, some little description. And I think, so Ronnie Long didn't fit it, because nobody knew about really, except probably locally, about the crime when it happened. And then no one wrote about, hey, isn't this stuff weird?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like this weird balance of saying, when it gets out of control, when there's 8,000 million people's eyes on an investigation, and it becomes a money-making enterprise, versus somebody who nobody cares.
Yeah.
yeah, it's just really interesting. And just when we're talking about the judicial part of it is, like I said, the media helps, but then when the media says, I can't be fed, I need more because this is how we make more and more money, and careers. I mean, careers were made out of
Yeah.
this, right?
Yes.
So, and then in the end, always going back to the victims of the crime, because they, Vanity Fair's got a really nice piece. They keep trying to interview the parents of Laci Peterson and the family members. They're like,
Leave
they
them
went
alone.
in, right? They went in and they started a foundation for victims in Laci's name. But again, to have the whole case amplified on, and again, it's double-edged sword. It's like, you want the world to know that your child is missing. You want the world to know.
Yeah.
Because you please help us look, right?
Mhm.
But to live through the tragedy and then have to deal in the public square with all of the craziness, like the stuff.
Yeah.
One big thing that just broke my heart was that played over and over here, because we were local. So things that happened locally, to say, we saw a van, we saw this, we saw that, and please watch out within so many mile radius. So anything that happened that you'd be on the lookout for, it was on local news all the time. But the weird people out there that that inject themselves in the case, that say, right, that'll say it was Satan worshipers, or it was this person, and because that raises the hope that, you know, they pulled her in a car, all these things that were just bogus.
Yeah.
That also became part of the story. And I just remember hearing this, say, oh, that poor mother, right? Because everything is terrible no matter what, but then it's I'm living on hope that she's alive. And the longer it goes on, everybody knows the rules. After 48 hours, it's not looking good. And it's been a week. And I still can't believe she's not, because it does that, you know, it's just like every interview you see of a parent, it's not the thing is, you don't expect it to happen to you. You can't imagine it. You can't imagine that complete shock to the entire system. And then on the periphery, watching what's happening to Scott. And then having 50 people on your front porch with a camera every day. That's pretty amazing. But that's really just part of what it's interesting about doing the show, but kind of looking at beyond just the case. Anybody can read about this case ad nauseum. There's so many books about it written, but just that whole question of and we'll try to keep pulling on that string through our cases to say, does this benefit us? And for mere entertainment, but when it goes on for years, because it's what's wild is happened in 2002, her disappearance. He was convicted 2 years later, and then in 2014, the death penalty was rescinded through the appeals. But it still feels like a fresh story. 20 years later, that people know exactly. You know, because when we put the thumbnail on, probably it'll get a lot of hits, like other names that are more recognizable. But just a food for thought to think about, and then also to kind of, you know, have grace for the 200,000 people on average that don't get any attention. If you think that, you know, we get the Amber Alert every once in a while, and sometimes there's a network, and I'm sure every city has it, that it comes on TV, someone with Alzheimer's, an elderly person, they call it a silver alert, you know, that they went for a walk and they probably lost where they're at and somebody needs to find them. But that's just, it's just a question. But that's what I wanted to bring to talk to you guys about. If you have any thoughts on it, or other cases that you think are interesting, or kind of in the same vein of looking at it beyond just the case, but kind of the aftermath, or of all the chaos that's involved, just put a comment under the video. Subscribe, of course. We would love for you to subscribe so we can have at least 2 people besides us. So that's what's so funny. I look and go, we have 3 followers. One is me, the second is Jenny, and the third is our first follower. But thank you for listening, Jenny. Of course, always great to share these stories with you and do the show. But yay, that's it.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye.